3 spine-chilling true stories of haunted alone at work encounters. Discover the sinister secrets. Emma tightened her grip on the steering wheel, her heart racing as she navigated through the nearly deserted streets of Maplewood. Each flickering streetlight cast eerie shapes in the shadows, heightening her dread. The once lively park loomed to her left, silent and foreboding under the pallor of the moonlight. How could children have no idea of the darkness that thrived here? The thought twisted in her stomach. She could almost hear her daughter's soft breathing echoing in her mind, reminding her of the burden she carried alone. As she pulled into Maplewood Pharmaceutical Factory, the familiar hum of fluorescent lights greeted her, a cold embrace of sterile brightness. But the silence was deafening, thick with tension. Rows of shelves stood like sentinels, their contents concealed in boxes marked with labels that had seen better days. Emma took a deep breath, stuffing down the whispers of her fears. Was it just her imagination, or did the shadows seem to shift this time? She shook her head, trying to stay focused on the shelves in front of her, yet, the air grew heavy with a disquiet she couldn't shake. Whispers seemed to linger, curling into her ears, faint, unsettling. What was that sound? A creak, a shudder. She turned, straining to see, her pulse racing. "You're just tired," she muttered to herself, forcing her feet to move, to organize the inventory, to work like a machine and not a fragile human. But the whispers intensified, weaving tales of long-lost workers, of darkness just beyond the walls. Was it merely her fatigue? Or was the factory alive? Anxiety prickled the back of her neck. Suddenly, a door, not just any door, but one hidden behind a stack of outdated stock, caught her eye. The wood was chipped, its paint peeling, as if it were trying to hide from the world. Somehow, she had never noticed it before. It cracked open with a groan that sent chills down her spine. Heart pounding, she took a cautious step inside, the weight of centuries wrapping around her like a too small coat. Inside, the air was suffocating, thick with dust and an ancient dread. Ghostly cries echoed, a chorus of despair that sent shivers racing down her arms. This was no ordinary place, this was a graveyard of souls, their stories woven with pain, fear, and loss. Emma could almost see them, faces twisted in anguish, trapped forever within these walls. Beneath it all lay a tragic history of neglect, workers who had vanished, swallowed by the factory's unfathomable darkness. Meanwhile, in the warehouse, James stared at his phone, the screen glowing like a beacon in the engulfing gloom. Calls had flooded in, frantic voices speaking of vanished supplies from forsaken sections. Each call felt like a sum of his anxiety, whispers tugging him towards secrets unwelcome. It felt as if the factory itself was reaching out for him, shadows cloaking his movements, filling every crevice with unease. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Sofia, the maintenance worker, flicked the switch, and the lights shuddered. Why did they feel like a heartbeat? She saw the shadows flicker at the edges of her vision, fleeting shapes that vanished before she could focus. Panic set in when she linked the strange phenomena with her family's own dark past, a curse, perhaps, wrapped up in the same inescapable spirals of horror they faced here. As their paths converged, Emma, James, and Sofia stood at the precipice of an unfolding nightmare. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, echoing deep within each of them. Could they trust each other, or would they too succumb to the shadows lurking in their hearts? With the dawn's early light promising hope, they faced the unimaginable truth: the factory was a living entity feeding on their fears, and none of them would leave unchanged. What chilling horrors lurked deeper within, waiting, watching, ready to claim them all? Sofia felt the cold creep of terror slither down her spine. The flickering lights battered her senses, creating a strobe effect of shadows that danced around her, mocking her fading courage. She froze, holding her breath, grasping the maintenance tools tightly in her hands. Was there something lurking behind her? Each creak of the floor echoed like a warning bell, and with one swift motion, she whirled around nothing. Just the emptiness that felt far too heavy. "Get yourself together," she whispered, forcing the words through lips that barely moved. She had always dismissed stories of hauntings as mere superstition, but now, alone amidst the rusted machinery and echoes of voices that never were, doubt seeped in like a chill. Meanwhile, Emma stood inside the darkened room that had swallowed her curiosity. The cries grew louder, piercing through her thoughts like knife blades. She fought the overwhelming urge to run, instead inching forward, propelled by an insatiable need to know. What had happened to the forgotten souls here? Forcing her trembling hand into the shadows, she stumbled upon a dusty old ledger resting on a rickety table. As she wiped away the grime, the page came alive with names: workers, employees, people who had been swallowed by the very machinery she now served. The ink had smudged, but one name stood out, bold and terrifying: Richard Lane. The date next to it marked the day he disappeared, the same date that plagued her dreams. Emma felt as if the quiet air embraced her like a lost friend before turning ice cold. Back in the warehouse, James was still pacing about, the weight of unseen eyes pressing heavily against him. The phantom calls kept coming, each one a haunting reminder of the factory's blood-soaked past. Was it possible that the spirits of the vanished were calling to him, pleading for help? Guilt gnawed at his heart, a sharp pain mingled with fear. He had been too busy with his own life to care about their stories now. It seemed, fate was throwing them at him full force. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently as if in protest to his thoughts. A shattering crash resonated through the warehouse, startling him to the core. He rushed toward the sound, pulse quickening. It was coming from the darkened corner where the old machinery lay. Perhaps it was just his imagination, but then he saw it, a shadow that loomed larger than the others, almost human in shape. What the hell? His voice trembled, caught in the grasp of terror. As the three of them unknowingly inched closer to one another, Emma compelled by the ledger, Sofia pushed forward by sheer anxiety, and James drawn by his courage. An unearthly presage wrapped around them. The whispers intensified into a cacophony of warnings, tugging desperately at their sanity. And then, as if a curtain was drawn, a glimpse of dread lay before them. A forgotten control panel, stained with rust and time, flickered ominously, lighting up in a deep crimson. All at once, they were pulled into the Hall of Horrors, one that connected the past to the present, a labyrinth where none could hide. They could feel the presence waiting just out of sight, hungry for despair. The true horror dawned on them. It wasn't the factory that was alive, it was the remnants of the lives that had once thrived and died here, eager to reclaim what was theirs. What would happen when the spirits finally stepped out of their prison? With hearts pounding and fear lurking at every corner, they faced one inevitable question: would they join the lost souls of Maplewood, or would they uncover the truth before it swallowed them whole? The air thickened, the stench of rust and decay filling their lungs as the crimson light pulsed rhythmically. Each pulse seemed to mimic the frantic beat of their hearts, echoing a primal warning. Sofia glanced at James, fear written all over his face, and then at Emma, whose wide eyes gleamed with a mix of dread and determination. "Do you hear that?" Emma whispered, clenching the ledger tighter. The whispers were growing louder, a multitude of voices interweaving into a baleful symphony. Was it a warning or a call? Each plea resonated deep within her, tugging at her spirit. Something felt irrevocably wrong, and yet a part of her couldn't look away. James stepped closer to the control panel, unwillingly drawn as if by an unseen force. Maybe we shouldn't be here," he muttered, but the words felt hollow against the rising din that enveloped them. As the shadows thickened, swallowing the corners of the room, a chill ran down his back. It was as if the darkness itself was hungry, stretching out tendrils to grasp them. "Did you say Richard Lane?" Sophia's voice broke through the oppressive silence, her expression shifting to uncertainty. "The name in the ledger? What if we're meant to find out what happened to him? To all of them?" Suddenly, the lights flickered again, this time plunging them into darkness. Sofia gasped as a bone-chilling laugh echoed through the room, cruel and taunting. Panic surged in her veins. "We need to leave. Now." She turned to bolt, but her feet wouldn't move. It was as if the very ground was conspiring against them, holding them in place, bound by an invisible chain forged in fear. Emma could feel a presence coiling around her, dense and suffocating. "Wait! We can't just run without knowing," she cried out, her courage warring against instinct. "What if there's a way to help them?" The words barely left her lips before something quietly rustled behind her, dragging her attention like a moth to a flame. Then they heard it, a mournful wail that pierced the air like the screeching of metal on metal, reverberating through their very bones. It was the sound of anguish, despair reaching out from beyond the veil. "We're not alone," James shouted, pulsing adrenaline igniting his reflexes. He turned back toward the shadows, heart racing, and suddenly everything shifted. The machinery around them began to creak ominously, awakening after years of dormancy. The lights blinked erratically, casting monstrous shapes that stretched and distorted. "No!" Sofia yelled, fighting against the weight on her chest, desperation blending into fear. "We need to go, now." She tried to pull Emma with her, but the younger woman remained rooted, her eyes fixed on a vision forming in the swirling darkness. From the depths, a figure began to emerge, a spectral silhouette flickering like a faulty light bulb. Its eyes were dark hollows, staring into their souls. Sofia's heart pounded. What are you?" she whispered, ice crawling along her spine. "I am their voice," the apparition rasped, its voice an eerie echo of the oppressive whispers. "You have awoken me. You must face the truth." With that proclamation, the room blurred, a chaotic swirl of lights and shadows crashing into one another before settling into an image. It was a scene from the factory's past, workers trapped in endless cycles of labor, their faces twisted in fear and pain, a ghostly requiem played out before them. "Remember, don't forget us," the shadow thrummed, and then fell silent, leaving the air crackling with unresolved tension. As their minds reeled, a final jolt coursed through the room, severing the vision and snapping them back. They stood breathless, hearts pounding, hands clammy against the damp chill. What was that? James shook his head, trying to disperse the haze. A beat of silence laid heavy between them, confusion mingling with dread, the question lingering in the air: what truth lay hidden behind the factory's cursed facade? But before they could even begin to process what they had seen, the control panel erupted with backlash, a blinding flash illuminating the room, leaving them viscerally aware of the thin line between their world and the dark abyss of lost souls reaching out for their light. And as the flickering lights darkened once more, one final question clawed at the edges of their minds: were they here to help, or were they merely the next to be claimed by the shadows of Maplewood? The air felt electric, buzzing with a tension that made every nerve in Sofia's body scream for escape. She recoiled instinctively, pressing herself against the cold, damp wall, her breath coming out quick and shallow. What the hell was that? She gasped, her voice trembling. James blinked rapidly, his mind wrestling with the shocking images they'd just witnessed. The factory's sorrowful past played like a reel in his head, the mournful faces of the forgotten workers haunting him. Are we really meant to help? He stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma's eyes glimmered with defiance, but confusion also danced there. We have to understand more. If that spirit is their voice, what if it leads us to the truth? Before they could argue, the ground beneath them shuddered. The machines shivered and groaned, awakening as if sharing a collective sigh of relief after years of silence. A terrible clang echoed through the room, sharp as a knife, drawing their attention back to the control panel. "Run!" Sofia screamed, the coursing terror bubbling to the surface. She grabbed Emma's arm, but the younger woman jerked free. "No. Not yet." Emma's voice rang with urgency. "We can't just abandon them." James felt panic rise in him. "Emma, we're not equipped for this. We listen." Emma cut him off, holding the ledger aloft as if it were a weapon. "We're here now. We have to find out what happened, or they might perish forever." The pulsing crimson light flickered and dimmed, trapping corridors into black nothingness. Shadows twisted into grotesque forms, whispering promises and threats, fighting for attention. A damp gust swept across them, bringing the bitter scent of rust that knotted in their throats, wrapping around their hearts like a vice. "Emma!" Sofia pleaded, her hands shaking. Let us just suddenly, the lights flared back to life, and the apparition reformed in the center of the room. Its hollow eyes consumed their sanity, dragging them deeper into despair. "You wish to help?" It croaked, an echo of tortured souls resonating within. "Are you ready to pay the price?" "What price?" James shouted, his voice cracking under the weight of the atmosphere. The spirit's grin stretched unnaturally wide, revealing rows of sharpened teeth. "The price of truth is blood." A violent tremor rippled through the floor, panic pulsing in every heartbeat. They were standing in the remnants of something ancient and deadly, lives lost remained close by. Sofia's heart raced. "What do you want from us?" she challenged, even as her mind screamed for her to run. "To see to know." The apparition leaned closer. "Bring me Richard Lane, all he lost. Only then can you uncover the darkness and set my people free." That name, Richard Lane, echoed in their minds like a secret waiting to be unlocked. James felt the pull of desperation. "Where do we find him?" "Follow the echoes," it whispered, each word dripping with malice. "But beware, your journey will ask for more than you're prepared to give." Before they could respond, the spectral figure vanished, replaced by an overwhelming surge of darkness, plunging the room back into near-total blackness. The machinery squealed, rattled, and once more came alive, vibrating with a sentience that put them on edge. Sofia felt a rush of cold run through her veins. "We can't wait any longer. We have to find a way out before it's too late." But as they turned, the shadows fell in thick layers, a dense fog swirling at their feet, dancing along with their rising terror as if alive. With a deep inhale, James took the lead, gripping the ledger tightly, his resolve hardening amidst the encroaching chaos. As they moved deeper into the maze of rusted machinery, unseen eyes felt like they were watching them, waiting. The whispers returned, louder now, swirling around their heads. "Come closer, stay a while." And just as they rounded a corner, a shriek sliced through the air, a sound of pure agony, as if time itself stretched and unraveled. What was that? Emma's breath hitched as she grabbed Sofia's arm, panic pouring into her eyes. I don't know." Sofia replied, the grasp of fear tightening around her throat. They hadn't realized how far they'd come until they stood in the center of an expansive chamber, a spotlight of crimson illuminating a mural of suffering. People bound by chains, faces wrenched in eternal torment, the last remnants of lives long extinguished. Breathless, James whispered, "Richard's Lane, he was one of them, wasn't he?" Suddenly, the ground shook, a harsh noise erupting from the walls. "Time is running out," a growl rumbled ominously. In that moment, they understood, they were bound to the factory's cursed history. But the question clawed at their minds: would the truth set them free, or was the truth a darker fate waiting just around the corner? The air crackled like a charged storm, choked with whispers and shadows as they stood trapped in that hellish chamber. James felt his heartbeat drumming erratically against his ribcage, a steady reminder that he was still alive in this place of horrific memories. "What do we do now?" Sofia's voice trembled, confidence leaching away. The mural loomed ominously behind them, the eyes of the damned seemingly critiquing their every move. Emma clutched the ledger, her knuckles white. "We find Richard Lane. If he's tied to all this, then we need to know why." James hesitated. "What if we're already too deep? What if stop?" Emma snapped, her gaze fierce yet laced with fear. "We can't turn back now. We've come too far." Sofia shivered as the voices swirled around them. "Maybe we should just leave. I'm not ready for whatever hell this is." But the ground continued to tremble beneath them, as if the factory itself was protesting their indecision. The machines roared back to life, clanks and rattles merging into a cacophony of despair, and smoke began to billow from crevices like ghostly fingers clawing at the air. "Look!" James pointed toward a passageway partially concealed in the corner, shrouded in an unsettling gloom. "That must lead somewhere." Uncertainty flickered between them, but the urgency of action overpowered their fear. They moved cautiously toward the passage, hesitation wrapping around them like a thick fog. The moment they stepped through, the atmosphere shifted, cold and clammy, sliding across their skin like a damp shroud. "Do you hear that?" Sofia's voice was a whisper, transfixed by the echoing moan that seeped from the darkness ahead. The echoes taunted them, oddly familiar fragmented whispers of ghostly dialogues lingering in the air. This way they beckoned eerily, pulling the three deeper into the darkness. Suddenly, the ledger in Emma's hands grew heavier as they walked. Puzzled, she flipped it open to discover pages fizzling with dark energy. Inky letters slithered across the paper, writing itself anew, revealing a horrifying account of Richard Lane's life, a once promising worker now mired in tragedy. "He lost everyone," Emma breathed, her eyes widening. "His family, his sanity," James gasped, heart sinking as more fragments of the past flooded into his mind. "He was trying to escape. Did he die here?" Sofia interrupted, panic rising. "Is that what we're witnessing? People trapped, unwilling to release whatever bond ties them to this place. Is that why they need Richard?" With a shuddering breath, Emma plunged deeper into the account, the air thickening with anticipation. But as she read, the laughter of the shadows grew louder, angry whispers layering over one another until they exploded into a chorus of torment, voices of those mistreated and long forgotten. "Enough!" Sofia yelled, clutching her ears, eyes darting wildly. "Make it stop!" The darkness answered her with a violent rush, cold wind racing through the corridor, slamming the metal door behind them shut with a deafening clang. A panic gripped their hearts. They were sealed inside this nightmare with no escape. "Stay together!" James shouted, gripping Sofia's arm, though the tremor in his voice betrayed his fear. "We can't lose one another." But the shadows coiled around them, and an ear-piercing scream erupted, reverberating off the walls like a banshee's wail. It was pure agony, breath-stealing, heart-stopping, as they whirled to face the darkness pressing in. "What if the truth? What if it's worse than we imagined?" Emma muttered, her eyes pleading, just as the ledger flew from her grasp, spiraling into the shadows. "No!" Emma lunged forward but stumbled, hands reaching towards nothingness as the scream surged. The darkness seemed to pulse, wrapping around her limbs like iron shackles, pulling her back. In the tumult, a figure began to materialize, emerging slowly from the depths, a tall man, face obscured in murky shadow, but a glimmer of recognition flashed within his eyes. "Richard!" Sofia breathed, fear surging through her. "Who dares disrupt my rest?" His voice echoed, deep and resonant, the pain threaded through each syllable, sending chills rippling through them. Just behind him, the growling shadows writhed like hungry beasts. James moved instinctively, panic clawing at his throat. We need to know what happened to you." Richard's hollow laughter slid across the chamber, layered with despair. "Only death will tell you the truth." And as he extended a hand toward them, the room flickered, an explosion of darkness engulfing everything, trapping them within a new kind of nightmare. What awaited them on the other side of that darkness? Would they uncover the truth about Richard Lane, or would the factory's power siphon their souls forever? The darkness folded around them like a thick, oppressive blanket. Emma's heart raced as she felt the cool breath of the void curl around her throat, squeezing until she gasped for air. Shadows flickered, morphing into twisted forms, their outlines barely holding a semblance of humanity. "Emma!" James shouted, desperation igniting his voice. He lunged forward, pushing through the encroaching murk, but it only seemed to deepen, pulling them down into its chilling embrace. Emma's screams echoed in the abyss, but they were swallowed by the cacophony of tortured wails that surrounded them. The dim light flickered back into existence, a gloomy glow illuminating Richard's face, twisted with sorrow and rage. It was a visage caught between salvation and damnation. Why are you showing us this?" James cried, fighting to pierce through the suffocating darkness that pressed against them. "You want the truth. It lies in their memories, in their torment." Richard gestured toward the shadows, and the whispers transformed into anguished cries, a flood of past lives tumbling into the present. Images collided in Emma's mind, dragging her down a treacherous path of memories, not her own, faces twisted in pain, souls lost in despair. She staggered, bewildered, grasping hold of a broken machine for support. It vibrated beneath her fingers, pulsating, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. "James! Sofia! You have to listen!" Emma yelled, a rising urgency propelling her. "This is what happened to Richard. This factory didn't just break him. It consumed everyone." The shadows writhed, silhouetted forms writhing in agony, drowning her words in their agony. A chill crept into her bones, a hollow sensation that swept through her like a fever. All around them, wails mingled into an unholy symphony of despair. Suddenly, Richard stepped forward, his eyes bright with intensity. "You've trespassed where none should tread. This curse binds them, and it seeks to bind you too. I won't let it." Sofia screamed, pulling Emma back as the echoes surged, forming a wall of darkness that threatened to separate them. "We can't let it drag us under." With a fierce determination, James seized the ledger, now floating before him, unscathed by the chaos. The pages flared to life, revealing a single word scrawled in frantic ink: freedom. Each letter shimmered, rippling as if alive, battling against the shadows that clawed hungrily at their souls. What if it's not just Richard?" Emma whispered, panic flooding her voice. "What if we can set them free?" "But how?" James demanded, his eyes shifting between the ledger and the relentless shadows. A violent quake disrupted their thoughts, sending them tumbling against the wall as the shadows screamed louder, overtaking the very fabric of reality itself. The machine behind them whirred with a vengeance, smoke billowing out like the exhalation of some monstrous creature awakened from slumber. "We need a sacrifice. We can't fight this without a price." Richard's voice shifted, desperation morphing into something darker, more desperate. "What?" Sofia asked, voice trembling. "Are you suggesting we give ourselves up?" "No." James shouted, clenching his fists. "We won't end up like them. We'll find another way." But time was slipping. Shadows coiled tighter, staunching their escape, insidious whispers clawing at their resolve. The ledger's glow waned, barely flickering now. "Please." Emma's voice rose, resonating through the chaos. "I don't want to end this way. Not here." The sinister laughter echoed again, reverberating off the walls, quaking through the bones of the factory, drowning out their pleas. "Only death will tell you the truth." Richard's figure began to dissipate, melting into the shadows, consumed by the rage he had summoned. A final scream erupted from the bowels of the darkness, resonating with desperation and agony. With a heavy heart, Emma lunged forward, each step pulling against the terror that clung to her like a predator ready to strike. What lay before them was a spiraling abyss, escape was slipping. Would they become the next victims of the factory's insatiable hunger? Or could they find a way to shred the shadows that sought to devour their souls? As the shadows began to close in for the final embrace, Emma's cry erupted into the darkness. "We'll find Richard. We'll save them, even if it kills us." But would they find Richard, or would the truth dismantle them all? The ground trembled further, shuddering beneath them, a low growl reverberating through the very walls. Emma felt it in her bones, a dreadful warning that resonated with every pulse of the quaking earth. The shadows responded, thrashing wildly, as if sensing their fear, hungry for their despair. "Hold on!" James shouted, gripping Emma's arm tightly. The coldness of the darkness was nearly overwhelming, a chill that crept in through her skin and settled deep in her marrow. She could barely keep her mind focused, each scream and cry echoing like a taunt around them. Sofia pulled at Emma's other hand, trying to drag her toward the flickering light of the ledger, but the shadows slithered like serpents, thinner and faster than they were. Emma could feel their tendrils brushing against her legs, a soft caress that felt wrong, tainted. She closed her eyes tight, wishing she could block it all out. "Look!" James shouted, his voice cracking. He pointed toward the ledger, now glowing brighter, the word freedom stretching and warping as if alive. The heaviness in the air shifted, giving them a glimmer of hope. But the shadows lunged at them, a massive wave, threatening to extinguish that light with one engulfing swoop. Concentrate! Sofia yelled, her voice shaky yet determined. We can't let them drown us. Focus on the ledger. That might be the key. Emma forced herself to breathe through the rising panic, glancing at the ledger. It pulsated, ripples of light cascading across its surface, inviting them to touch it. But who would touch it first? The darkness was closing in fast, swallowing everything in its path. Someone has to step forward. James roared, his courage shining through the fear. It could be the only way. Not me. Emma gasped, retreating further into Sofia. I can't give myself up. Not when I don't know what's on the other side. Richard's apparition flickered in her mind, torn and tortured, a grim reminder of the cost of those who had come before. Yet, as the shadows lunged, with gnarled faces looming closer, her resolve wavered. We have to push back, Sofia hissed, eyes darting around for a way out. If we don't do something now, we're lost. We can't let their pain consume us, not like this. Then let us make them remember. James declared, stepping forward first. We summon the remnants of those souls, remind them of their humanity, and in turn, we might save them and ourselves. He raised the ledger above his head, shouting the word freedom until it echoed in the chambers of the factory. The shadows halted, recoiling briefly. Emma looked around as if the shadows had heard his plea, but in their place was a deafening silence, heavier than the screams that had filled the air earlier. What is happening? Emma murmured, her heart pounding like a drum. But before anyone could respond, the shadows began to shift violently, twisting back into ghastly forms of the past, their faces now clear and distorted with agony. An orchestra of wailing erupted, an anguished chorus that drowned out all reason. James! Emma cried, realizing too late what they had awakened. The apparitions howled, a cacophony that rattled their very souls. It was as if the factory itself was screaming along with them, splintering the air around them. They struggled against the weight of despair rapidly descending once more. Run! Sofia yelled, abandoning caution. They darted, feet pounding against the factory's cold floor, desperate to escape the coming storm. But even as they fled, Emma felt a pull at her heart, a voice whispering past the chaos. Without sacrifice, there is no salvation. The words slithered into her mind, chilling her. As they dashed through the oppressive haze, a question loomed larger than the darkness itself: could they truly escape what was waiting to claim them? A shadow burst into their path, blocking their route. The tendrils writhed, hungry, greedy for flesh and fear. In that moment, doubt flickered in her heart. There is no way out. But as the darkness loomed closer, its breath cold against her skin, Emma heard it again, only through their memories can you find your own. The fear tightened in her throat, but they couldn't stop now. She would fight. They all would. But who would be the one to take the plunge into the depths of despair to rescue them all? As the shadows lunged, Emma yelled, determination blazing in her eyes. We have to face them. Together. But even as they rallied, the question echoed through Emma's mind: how much would they have to pay to finally know freedom? The shadows twisted, contorting into impossible shapes as they surged closer. Emma's heart raced, a wild rhythm that drowned out the howling specters. This was it. There was no place to hide. The darkness was a living entity, savoring the taste of their fear. Back! Back! James shouted, raising the ledger as if it were a shield. But how could mere words, ancient and echoing through nightmares, stand against the onslaught of anguished souls? Each whispered plea grew louder, intertwining with their own freakish fear. There was no escape from the past. Emma felt the chilling breath of dark spirits against her skin, seeping through her clothes, chilling her to the bone. The icy fingers of despair slid up her back, threatening to pull her into the depths. She cast a glance at Sofia, who was already wrestling with her own dread, eyes darting. "We have to remember them," Sofia cried, desperation tightening her throat. "If we can summon their pain, we can learn from it." "Summon their pain? Are you insane?" Emma replied, struggling against the overwhelming pressure. "They'll turn on us. They're already turned. They don't want freedom, they want us." James interjected, stepping forward, fervor putting fire in his eyes. "It's our memories that hold the key. We can remind them of who they were." "Right," Emma said, her inner voice screaming against the suggestion. "And what happens if they remember too much?" The shadows drew closer, faces morphing into expressions of pure rage and sorrow. Echoes of lives once lived filled the air. "Remember us. Remember." Tendrils of shadow lashed out, whipping past them like whips of ice. Emma ducked as one reached for her throat, feeling its bitter pull. She stumbled back, fear clawing inside her heart. Suddenly Sofia screamed, her hand slipping from Emma's. "Sofia!" Emma's voice cracked, panic tearing through her, but James didn't flinch. He turned back to the ledger, unyielding. "We will not be pawns. I will show them who they once were." With a strength that surprised even him, he hurled the ledger towards the sky, commanding it with every ounce of his strength. "I summon the memories of your mortal lives. Recall your love, your anguish. Relive it with us." The ledger soared overhead, pulsating with a furious light that illuminated the cavernous factory, pushing shadows back like a tide. Emma watched in disbelief as the swirling darkness began to swirl around the ledger, caught in its radiance for a moment, stalling, as if at war with itself. "Keep it steady," Sofia shouted, fear lighting up her eyes as she reached for Emma once more. With a pounding heart, Emma grabbed the edges of the ledger, feeling its warmth seep into her palms, a spark of hope amidst the darkness. "Together, we can guide them back." The moment they reinforced their grip, a sudden silence fell, freezing the chaos around them. Shadows, still, as if waiting for the next command. Emma's breath came ragged as a sea of faces, lost and twisted in grief, materialized before her, their mouths opening in soundless screams. "Do you regret?" The voices haunted her, wavering like flickering flames. "Please," she yelled, not knowing if it was directed at the shadows or at herself. "We are here. We will remember you. But you need to let us go." As those words left her mouth, the ledger cracked a little, the light flickering, dangerously close to extinguishing. Emma felt it. She felt the dark grasp tightening once again around her legs, the pull of those memories wanting to drag her down. Then, in a flash of horror, realization hit her. It wasn't just their memories at stake. In this twisted game, they were part of the haunting, just as much those tormented souls were. "What have we done?" Emma gasped, eyes widening in terror. As shadows swirled into a monstrous form, looming grotesquely over them, she realized, perhaps the only freedom they would know was to become part of the very darkness they fought so hard to escape. "Take them back!" she screamed, but it was too late. The darkness surged. There was no returning now, and then she fell, grasping the ledger desperately. Feeling the chill envelop her, pulling her toward the brink. As Emma's sight dimmed, the last flickering words echoed through her mind, a horrifying contemplation: would they be trapped forever, or would they dare to uncover what lay hidden within the depths of darkness waiting to be unleashed? What awaited them on the other side would change everything if they survived. Emma plunged into a thicker darkness, the ledger slipping from her fingers as the shadows clawed at her like living smoke. The faces of lost souls twisted around her, their mouths stretching wide in silent wails, desperate for release. James and Sofia's faces disappeared into the void, replaced by the lurking dread of 1,000 unseen eyes. Each heartbeat sent ripples of fear coursing through her veins. The temperature plummeted. She couldn't breathe, the cold seeped into her lungs like ice water, choking any thought of escape. Just when despair threatened to swallow her whole, a flicker of light danced in the distance, a small beacon of hope shimmering against the dark tide. "Emma!" A voice sliced through the silence, piercing her daze. It was James. She turned toward the sound but saw only shadows squirming. "James!" she shouted, the word lost amid the whispers swirling like a storm. She stretched her arm forward, hoping to find him, to feel human warmth once more. "Where are you?" "Follow the light." His voice erupted again, distant but resonant, filled with urgency. The warmth from the light beckoned like a flame to a moth. With every ounce of willpower, Emma tore herself away from the grasping shadows, driven toward that flickering glow, but the darkness contorted, reaching out in furious desperation. Tendrils lunged at her, they coiled around her limbs, twisting, pulling her back. "Join us," the voices insisted, blend of agony and beckoning softness. "Embrace what you are, what you were." As if reliving old memories, Emma felt faint echoes of a forgotten life flicker through her mind. Pieces of joy mixed with unspeakable sorrow. Could there be beauty buried within this dread? Bile rose in her throat as she stumbled, her legs fighting against the phantom chains. In that moment of hesitation, James's light surged, temporarily repelling the encroaching shadows. Emma sprinted through the gap, limbs aching from the struggle. She could hear his breaths, quick and frantic, somehow guiding her. "This way." They collided, hands clasping together, their fingers interlocking in desperate solidarity. Sofia, now at their side, almost sank to the floor, gasping as if her soul had barely slipped through the grasp of despair. "What happened?" Sofia coughed, her eyes wide, swimming with unshed tears. Did they catch you?" "The ledger." Emma croaked, scanning the darkness surrounding them, dread creeping back into her heart. It was gone. It had been swallowed whole by the shadows, leaving them vulnerable. All they had was the aching connection between them and that flickering memory of light. "I don't know what to do." Emma's voice trembled, the weight of their predicament pressing down like a stone. "If we can't remember who they are or what we are, we'll be lost in this shadow forever." "Then we keep fighting," James insisted, his eyes fierce with determination. "We find a way to free both them and us." "Release them," Emma whispered, thinking of the faces that haunted her, of the pain they bore. "But how?" A sudden resonance filled the air, the whispers transforming into a disjointed melody, drawing them back into the depths of their nightmares. The realization hit her like a knife thrust into her gut. The memories were the way forward, and yet they had to confront the darkness they once were. But would it be enough to save them, or would they fall deeper into despair? The shadows expanded, centering around them, forming a spiral of rage and sorrow. Emma stepped forward, steeling herself, trembling hands raised into the void. We remember you." The moments swirled with tension. Would they endure it together, or would their efforts only summon the worst of the darkness? The shadows writhed, almost testing them, ready to unveil their deepest fears. Then, in a voice that resonated from a place beyond this world, the shadows echoed back. "If you dare." What would happen next? Should they risk everything and uncover the haunting depths waiting at the center of their collective memories, or was it safer to succumb to the darkness and let it have them? The shadows tightened around Emma, James, and Sofia, a swirling vortex of despair that felt almost sentient, hungry, waiting for the moment to consume them whole. Emma's heart raced, each beat coming faster than the last. "We have to remember," she shouted, her voice anchored in fear but brimming with a fierce resolve. "They need to hear us." "Right," James chimed in, pushing deeper into the thick chaos surrounding them. "We know who you are." His shout echoed, reverberating through the fabric of the darkness. "You lost hope. You were betrayed." The shadows responded, contracting for a moment before rushing back like a tidal wave, howling in agony. "Remember us, release us." Their chant filled the air, drowning out all reason, echoing through the core of them where doubt swirled. Sofia, gripping Emma's hand, jumped to her feet. "Do you see that light?" she gasped, half in awe, half in fear. "It's dim, but it's still there. If we pour everything we have into it, it could guide us." Emma nodded, determination flaring in her heart. "Then let us allow their screams to fill us." It was a gamble, yet what choice did they have? The three friends formed a circle, gripping each other firmly, allowing the panic to wash over them but refusing to surrender to despair. Let their memories guide us, Emma breathed, eyes wide as she focused on the dim light, feeling its warmth seep into her soul. We have to recall their joy, their laughter. That's what will set them free. As their voices wove a tapestry of shared memories celebrated, the air grew thicker and hotter, crackling with energy, igniting the shadows into a frenzy. The whispers escalated, transforming, intertwining with their own facts and experiences, moments of bliss caught in dreams, laughter shared over fleeting riches, echoes of family and love lost. In the dark, you belonged. James shouted, channeling the warmth they had forged from their connection, you were not just workers, you were living, breathing souls. Remember your lost loves and your unbroken bonds. A surge of light ignited within the trio, the ledger's power surging back to life in their shared memories, resonating with a pulse matching their hearts. They felt the sacrifices of the lives lost within this hell. As emotions swelled, the shadows seemed to retreat, wailing in agony, revealing a flicker of time between despair and hope. The air grew electric, charged with warmth, growing brighter as their voices unified, we remember you. Streaks of radiant light pierced through the darkness, illuminating the long-forgotten faces trapped in anguish. The apparitions surfaced, faces emerging, darkened by sorrow yet tinged with excitement at being remembered. The cacophony erupted into a symphonic heartbeat, a chorus of longing, of freedom, of life reclaimed. Release us, let us be free. They cried, and with every heartbeat, the barrier between the living and the lost dissolved like a cloud being pushed aside by a gust of wind, leaving an open invitation to step through. As the shadows writhed, desperate to reclaim their hold, Emma pushed forth with everything she had. Let their memories save us. Together, we are stronger. The lead spectre, their guide, rose higher, its voice steady and powerful. Only through their memories shall you find your truth. Will you dare face what lies beyond? That question clawed at their hearts. Would they allow the fear of the unknown to freeze them? No. Emma could feel hope blooming amidst the dark, hopefully a thing woven tightly together. It wasn't simply about survival anymore, it was about release. Even if it costs us everything. James vowed. Together. Sofia echoed, feeling an enlightening rush, an awakening within her spirit. As light emanated and enveloped them, the shadows shimmered and began to fade. They merged with the light, weaving through the cords of memories trapped in the factory's cruel grasp. With the final shared breath, they uttered, we choose life. Before the shadows erupted into a haunting wail, the last stand against change. A blinding flash engulfed them, heat washed over them, and with that, they felt the distance shrink. And suddenly, they stood at the threshold of a new beginning, the factory transformed into a place of light, secret pain now shared, encapsulating hope that forever dwelled against despair. In that moment, Emma, James, and Sofia stepped forward, hand in hand, no longer burdened by the shadows of the lost. They emerged from the shadows of Maplewood, forever changed, carrying the memories of those who had suffered and released. The factory now stood as a shelter of their memories, transformed by their courage. No one else will be forgotten, Emma whispered, warmth coursing through her. They had faced the darkness, and in doing so, uncovered the power to reclaim both the living and lost. And as the first light of dawn broke over Maplewood, they felt the weight lift, light shining into the dark corners of the universe, not just for them but for all souls yearning to be remembered. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support for stories that uncover the unimaginable. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm and help bring more thrilling tales to life. Flood the comments section below with your reactions and theories. What do you think will happen next? Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support is what keeps the haunting alive.